Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we are going to stop looking out at the galaxies, the black holes, and the dying stars, and we are going to turn the telescope around. We are going to look inward, into the most complex, baffling, and terrifying structure in the known universe, the human mind. We are here to ask a question that has haunted philosophers, theologians, and scientists since the moment we first learned to think. It is a question that challenges the very nature of your identity, your reality, and your mortality. The question is found in the title of our investigation tonight: Quantum Entanglement. Is consciousness a field? To answer this, we must first confront the silence behind your eyes. Right now, you are listening to my voice. You are seeing the light from your screen. You feel the weight of your body against the chair. You have a sense of being. You are the protagonist of a movie that is playing exclusively inside your head. But ask yourself, where is the screen? Who is the audience? And most importantly, how is this movie being generated? Modern science, for all its triumphs, has a gaping hole at its center. We can map the genome, we can smash atoms, we can land robots on Mars. But when it comes to explaining why you feel like you, science hits a brick wall. This is what the philosopher David Chalmers famously coined the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problem is understanding the mechanics. We know how the brain works on a physical level. It is a biological machine. It is a wet computer made of meat. We know that when light hits your retina, it is converted into an electrical signal. That signal travels down the optic nerve and hits the visual cortex at the back of your brain. Neurons fire. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin bridge the gaps between synapses. We can trace this wiring diagram with extreme precision. We can tell you exactly which part of the brain lights up when you do math, or when you smell a flower, or when you feel fear. But that is where the explanation stops, and that is where the horror begins. Because there is absolutely nothing in the laws of physics, chemistry, or biology that explains how a spark of electricity becomes a feeling. Think about the color red. A physicist can tell you that red is light with a wavelength of about 700 nanometers. A neuroscientist can tell you that when this wavelength hits your eye, a specific pattern of neurons fires in your brain. But nowhere in that wavelength, and nowhere in those firing neurons, is the experience of redness. The redness is not in the photon. The redness is not in the brain cell. The redness is a ghost. It is a qualitative experience, a qual that exists only for you. If I were to open up your skull right now and look inside, I would not find your thoughts. I would not find the image of the room you are sitting in. I would not find your memories of childhood. I would only find 3 pounds of grey, gelatinous tissue, pulsating in the dark. It is silent. It is unfeeling. It is just matter. Yet, somehow, out of that silent, dark, wet sponge, comes the symphony of existence. How does matter create mind? How does a collection of sodium and potassium ions flowing across a membrane create the agony of heartbreak, the abstract concept of justice, or the terror of death? This is the hard problem, and the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. By all logical accounts, we should be philosophical zombies. This is a concept used in the philosophy of mind to describe a being that looks like a human and acts like a human but has no inner life. A robot can be programmed to scream if you pinch it. It has sensors that detect tissue damage, and it has a speaker that emits a sound. But the robot does not feel pain. It just processes data. The terrifying question is, Why aren't we zombies? We could have evolved to be perfect survival machines without ever being conscious. We could process light, sound, and pain inputs, react to them, eat, reproduce, and die, all without ever experiencing a single emotion. The lights could be on, but with nobody home. But we are home. There is a you in there. Why? Mainstream science operates on the assumption of materialism. This view holds that the brain creates consciousness the same way a generator creates electricity. It assumes that if you put enough neurons together in a complex enough network, consciousness will simply emerge. It treats the mind as a byproduct of computation. The implication here is that you are your brain. You are the wiring, and when the wiring breaks, the signal stops, and you cease to exist. But this model is failing. Despite decades of research and billions of dollars, we have not found the seat of consciousness. We cannot find the module in the brain that generates the self. We can damage parts of the brain and change personality. Yes, we can shut off parts of the brain and stop speech, but the unified sense of being the observer behind the eyes remains elusive. It is like trying to find the announcer inside the radio by taking the radio apart. You can unscrew the back of a radio. You can look at the transistors, the wires, the speakers. You can trace the electrical path perfectly. You can even smash a specific wire and the sound will stop. A materialist would look at the broken radio and say, "See, the wire was creating the music. I broke the wire and the music died." But we know that is not true. The radio does not create the music. The radio receives the music. The music exists as an invisible signal, an electromagnetic field that permeates the room. The radio is just a complex device designed to tune into that field and translate it into sound. If you destroy the radio, the broadcast continues. The signal is still there. You just lack the machine to hear it. This is the radical, terrifying shift we are exploring tonight. What if the brain is not a generator? What if the brain is an antenna? What if consciousness is not something that happens inside your head, but something that happens to your head? This hypothesis fundamentally changes our place in the universe. If the brain is a receiver, then you are not the neurons. You are the signal. The biological evolution of the human brain was not about building a computer to manufacture a mind. It was about building a receiver sensitive enough to tune into a fundamental frequency of the universe. This aligns with the strangeness of our subjective experience. We often feel that our thoughts come to us rather than from us. Artists and musicians speak of inspiration as if it were a transmission they just happened to catch. We speak of losing ourselves in a moment, or feeling connected to something larger. Perhaps these are not metaphors. If the receiver theory is true, it solves the hard problem by removing it entirely. We don't have to explain how matter creates mind, because matter doesn't create mind. Mind is already there. Mind is a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity, like electromagnetism, like space-time itself. We are swimming in a sea of consciousness, and our brains are just small vessels that scoop up a portion of that water and give it a shape. But this solution brings with it a new set of nightmares. If consciousness is a field, then the boundaries of the self are an illusion. In a materialist world, you are a castle, fortified and separate from everyone else. Your thoughts are private. Your existence is contained within your skull. But in a field theory, you are not a castle. You are a window. You are an opening through which the universe is looking at itself. And this leads us to the mechanism. If the brain is an antenna, how does it work? A radio uses simple electronics to catch radio waves, but the brain is wet, warm, and messy. For years, physicists dismissed the idea that the brain could interact with quantum fields. They said the brain was too noisy. They said quantum states are delicate. They require absolute zero temperature and a vacuum to exist. They said that inside the chaotic environment of a living cell, any quantum connection would be destroyed instantly. They called the brain a wet computer and left it at that. They told us we were just biological machines destined to rot, but they were looking in the wrong place. They were looking at the neurons, the giant cables of the brain. They should have been looking deeper. They should have been looking inside the cells, at the microscopic scaffolding that holds the very fabric of life together. Recent discoveries have begun to suggest that biology is far more quantum than we ever dared to imagine. We have seen birds use quantum entanglement to navigate the magnetic fields of Earth. We have seen plants use quantum tunneling to harvest sunlight with near 100% efficiency. Evolution, it seems, mastered quantum mechanics billions of years before we even invented the word. So, is it possible that the human brain, the most complex object in the cosmos, is also a quantum device? Is it possible that deep within the wet machinery of our cells, there is a component that acts as a bridge between the physical world and the non-physical field of consciousness? To answer this, we have to go small. We have to go beyond the neuron, beyond the synapse, down into the dark, subatomic basement of the mind. We have to look at a theory that was once laughed at, but is now coming back to haunt the materialist view of the world. Tonight, we are going to explore the possibility that your mind is not in your head. We are going to look at the evidence that suggests you are a ghost in a machine, receiving a broadcast from a source that exists everywhere and nowhere at once. We are about to step onto the bridge between science and the soul, and once we cross that bridge, the way you look at your own reflection in the mirror will never be the same. The silence behind your eyes is about to get very loud. To understand the mechanism that might allow consciousness to exist outside the skull, we must first break the laws of physics as you understand them. We must abandon the comfortable, intuitive world of Isaac Newton, a world where apples fall down, planets orbit stars, and things are exactly where they appear to be. We must descend into the basement of reality, into the subatomic realm, where the rules of logic dissolve and the universe begins to look less like a machine and more like a magic trick. Here, we encounter the phenomenon that Albert Einstein went to his grave refusing to believe, a phenomenon that suggests that the separation between objects, the very concept of distance itself, is an illusion. This is the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. In our daily lives, we are governed by the principle of locality. Locality is a safety feature of the universe. It states that an object is influenced directly only by its immediate surroundings. If you want to move a coffee cup, you have to touch it. If you want to speak to someone on the other side of the world, you have to send a signal, be it a sound wave or a radio wave, and that signal has to travel through the space between you. Nothing is instantaneous. Even light, the fastest messenger in the universe, has a speed limit. It takes 8 minutes for light to travel from the sun to the earth. If the sun were to suddenly vanish right now, we wouldn't know it for 8 minutes. We would still see the light, feel the gravity, and orbit a ghost until the information finally crossed the distance to reach us. This delay keeps the universe orderly. It ensures that cause always precedes effect. But quantum entanglement violates this safety feature. It suggests that two particles can share a connection that transcends space and time entirely. Imagine we take a subatomic particle, like an electron. Electrons have a property called spin. You can think of it like a tiny spinning top, although the reality is much more abstract. For the sake of this visualization, let's say the electron can spin either up or down. Now imagine we take a single energetic process and use it to create two electrons at the exact same time. Because of the laws of conservation, these two electrons must balance each other out. If one is spinning up, the other must be spinning down. The total spin of the system must be zero. We call this pair entangled. They are not two separate particles anymore. They are a single quantum system that happens to occupy two different spaces. Here is where the madness begins. According to quantum mechanics, until you measure them, these particles do not have a defined spin. They are not up or down. They are in a state of superposition, meaning they are both up and down simultaneously. They are a cloud of probability. It is only when you look at them, when you force them to interact with the world, that they collapse into a definite state. So, we take these two entangled electrons. We keep one here in the laboratory on Earth, and we put the other one on a rocket ship. We send that rocket to the other side of the galaxy, let's say to a planet orbiting the star Andromeda, 2.5 million light-years away. Now, we have one electron here, and one electron 2.5 million light-years away. They are separated by an abyss of void and time that is incomprehensible to the human mind. You walk into the lab on Earth and you measure your electron. Instantly, the wave function collapses. The probability cloud vanishes, and the electron snaps into a state. Let's say you measure it, and it is spin up. At that exact same moment, not a second later, not 8 minutes later, but instantaneously, the electron in the Andromeda galaxy will snap into spin down. There was no signal sent between them. There was no radio wave. There was no beam of light. To send a signal across that distance would take 2.5 million years, moving at the speed of light. But the connection happened in zero time. The partner particle knew instantly that its twin had been observed, and it adjusted its reality to match. It is as if the 2.5 million light-years of space between them didn't exist. It is as if they were right next to each other. This is what Einstein famously mocked as spookachtige Fernwirkung, spooky action at a distance. Einstein hated this idea. He hated it with a passion. To him, it smelled of sorcery, not science. It violated the theory of relativity, which states that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. If information is traveling instantly, it breaks the cosmic speed limit. It implies that the universe is non-local, meaning that things here can affect things there without touching them. Einstein spent the latter years of his life trying to disprove this. He argued that quantum mechanics was incomplete. He suggested that the particles must have hidden variables, secret instructions written inside them from the moment they were created, like a pair of gloves. If you put a left glove in one box and a right glove in another, and send them to opposite ends of the universe, you know automatically that if you open one box and find a left glove, there is no magic communication. The state was set from the beginning. Einstein wanted the universe to be like the gloves. He wanted it to be determined, logical, and safe. But Einstein was wrong. Decades after his death, a physicist named John Bell developed a mathematical test to see if these hidden variables existed. And in 2022, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to three scientists, Alain Aspect, John Clauser, and Anton Zeilinger, who proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the hidden variables are not there. The gloves are not predetermined. When the particles are in flight, they are truly undefined. They are not left or right. They are nothing and everything at once. And when one decides to be something, the other essentially feels it across the universe. The universe is not locally real. The connection is absolute. This discovery is shattering because it dismantles our concept of separation. We look at the world and we see empty space. We see air between you and the screen. We see miles between cities. We see light years between stars. We believe that space is a stage, and we are actors standing on specific coordinates of that stage. But entanglement suggests that space is not a barrier. It suggests that at a fundamental level, the fabric of reality is stitched together in ways we cannot see. Distance might just be a macroscopic hallucination. If two particles can interact instantly across a galaxy, then, in some higher dimensional sense, they are touching. They have never been separated. The space between them is just a construct for our benefit, a way for our brains to organize data, but it is not a fundamental truth of their existence. Now, consider the implications of this for the physical universe. We used to think of atoms as tiny billiard balls bouncing around in a void, but if atoms can be entangled, then the universe is not a collection of isolated objects. It is a vast, interconnected web. And this brings us back to the Big Bang. Current cosmological theory states that 13.8 billion years ago, the entire universe, all the matter, all the energy, every photon, every electron, every quark that makes up your body, the chair you sit on, the air you breathe, and the stars you see was compressed into a singularity smaller than a single atom. In that first moment of creation, everything was touching. Everything interacted with everything else. If everything was once unified in a single quantum state, and if quantum entanglement persists, then is it possible that on some deep, subatomic level, everything in the universe is still entangled with everything else? Is it possible that the separation between me and you, or subject and object, is just a persistent illusion caused by our limited perception? This is where the physics begins to bleed into the philosophical. If matter can be linked across infinite distances, and if the brain is made of matter, then the brain is not necessarily isolated. The materialist view that your consciousness is trapped inside your skull relies on the assumption of locality. It relies on the idea that your neurons are only talking to the neurons right next to them. But if the atoms in your brain are entangled with atoms outside of your brain, then the system that constitutes your mind does not stop at the bone. The network could extend outwards. Einstein called it spooky because it frightened him. It frightened him because it meant that we are not independent observers watching the universe from the outside. It meant we are woven into it. It meant that the act of observation changes the observed, no matter how far away it is. It implied a universe that is holistic, instant, and eerily responsive. This is the mechanism we needed. If we are looking for a way to explain how consciousness could be a field, something that is everywhere and nowhere, entanglement provides the physical precedent. It provides the wires for the universal radio. It shows us that nature has no problem with non-local connections. However, skeptics have long argued that this is irrelevant to biology. They argue that while entanglement works for single electrons in a frozen vacuum, it cannot work in the warm, wet, chaotic mess of the human brain. They say the brain is too hot. They say the decoherence, the loss of quantum connection, would happen too fast for it to matter. They argue that you cannot compare a subatomic particle to a neuron. But nature has a habit of humiliating skeptics. Just as we once thought birds navigated by sight, only to find they read magnetic fields, we are now finding that biology is far more elegant than we gave it credit for. We are discovering that life might have found a way to protect these fragile quantum states, to build quiet rooms inside the chaos of the cell, where the spooky action can take place. And the search for these quiet rooms leads us to a specific structure, a structure that exists inside every single neuron in your brain, a structure that looks suspiciously like a computer component, but one that is billions of years old. To understand how the radio receives the signal, we have to look at the antenna. We have to look at the microtubules. For decades, neuroscientists and biologists have operated under a single dominant metaphor. It is a metaphor that you likely learned in school, one that you accept as fact without even realizing it is just a model. It is the metaphor of the wet computer. The standard view of neuroscience is that the human brain is essentially a biological version of the laptop sitting in front of you. It is a machine made of meat. Instead of silicon chips, it has neurons. Instead of copper wires, it has axons. Instead of electricity running through circuits, it has ions flowing across membranes. And instead of binary code, zeros and ones, it has action potentials. A neuron either fires or it doesn't. It is on or it is off. According to this view, your consciousness is nothing more than software. It is the output of a massively parallel processing system. You are an algorithm running on organic hardware. When you see a face, your brain isn't experiencing the face. It is simply processing visual data, running it against a database of stored memories, and outputting a recognition signal. When you fall in love, you aren't connecting with another soul. Your brain is simply releasing a specific cocktail of dopamine and oxytocin to encourage reproduction, based on a calculated probability of genetic compatibility. It is a cold, mechanical, and efficient explanation. It fits perfectly with the materialist worldview. It suggests that if we could just build a computer powerful enough, one with as many transistors as we have neurons, it would eventually wake up and say, hello. But there is a problem. Actually, there are several problems. As we look closer at the wet computer model, cracks begin to form in the chassis. The numbers don't add up. The speed doesn't make sense. And the complexity of life seems to defy the simplicity of the switch. Let's look at the mechanism of the wet computer, the synapse. The synapse is the gap between two neurons. For a thought to move from one cell to another, it has to cross this gap. In the standard model, this is a chemical process. An electrical signal travels down the axon to the tip of the neuron. There, it triggers the release of little chemical packets called neurotransmitters. These chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, glutamate, float across the gap like tiny boats drifting across a river. They dock on the other side, unlock a receptor, and trigger a new electrical signal in the next neuron. This process is amazing, but in the world of computing, it is agonizingly slow. It relies on chemical diffusion. It takes milliseconds. In the world of high-speed data processing, milliseconds are an eternity. If your brain were truly just a computer relying on these chemical handshakes, your reaction times should be slower. Your processing of complex visual scenes should be laggy. but it isn't. When a baseball is flying toward your face, you don't calculate the trajectory using chemical diffusion. You move instantly. When a musician improvises a jazz solo, they are making decisions faster than the chemical computer model should allow. Furthermore, there is the problem of the binding. This is a mystery that has frustrated neuroscientists for years. When you look at a red apple, different parts of your brain process the shape, round, the color, red, and the texture, smooth. These are processed in different areas of the visual cortex, separated by physical distance. Yet, you don't experience a disjointed list of attributes. You experience a single, unified object, an apple. The redness and the roundness are instantly bound together into one conscious experience. For this binding to happen, all these disparate parts of the brain need to synchronize perfectly, instantaneously, without a central processor coordinating them. In a chemical brain, this synchronization is incredibly difficult to explain. The lag of chemical signaling should make the world feel disjointed, like a badly dubbed movie where the audio doesn't match the video. But our reality is seamless. This suggests that whatever is coordinating the brain is happening faster than chemistry. It suggests there is a deeper, faster layer of communication. And then there is the paramecium argument. To understand why the brain as a computer model fails, we don't need to look at a human. We can look at a single-celled organism. Consider the paramecium. It is a tiny, single-celled creature that lives in pond water. It has no brain, it has no neurons, it has no synapses. It is just a bag of protoplasm. And yet, the paramecium is smart. It swims around. It hunts for food. It avoids predators. It can find a mate and have sex. It can even learn. Experiments have shown that if you put a paramecium in a capillary tube, it can figure out how to escape. If you do it again, it escapes faster. It remembers. How does a creature with no neurons process information? The wet computer model says that intelligence comes from the connections between neurons. It says the magic is in the network. But the paramecium proves that intelligence exists inside the cell, not just between them. If a single cell can process information, hunt, and learn without a network, then a neuron in your brain is not just a simple on-off switch. The standard model treats a neuron like a light switch or a transistor, a dumb device that just passes a signal. But if the paramecium is any indication, a single neuron is actually a supercomputer in its own right. This changes the math of the human brain catastrophically. If the brain is a network of switches, we have about 100 billion neurons and 100 trillion synapses. That is a lot of computing power, roughly equivalent to the world's most powerful supercomputers today. It is understandable why we think AI might catch up. But if every single one of those 100 billion neurons is itself a supercomputer complex, adaptive, and intelligent on the inside, then the computing power of the human brain is not 10 to the power of 15 operations per second. It is closer to 10 to the power of 27. That is a number so large it is effectively infinite compared to our technology. It means the human brain is billions of times more powerful than the entire internet combined. It means that treating the brain like a chemical computer is like treating a spaceship like a wheelbarrow. We are vastly underestimating the machine. So, if the computation isn't happening just in the chemical synapses, where is it happening? What is the paramecium using to think? What is the neuron using to process data? It is using its internal structure, the skeleton of the cell. For a long time, Biologists thought cells were just bags of water held up by a rigid frame like the bones in your body. They called this the cytoskeleton. They thought its only job was to keep the cell's shape. But as we looked closer with electron microscopes, we realized the cytoskeleton is not just a skeleton. It is a highway system. It is a logic board. It is a dynamic, shifting lattice of protein polymers that organizes the cell's entire existence. And this brings us back to the limitations of the wet computer. A computer is deterministic. If you input 2 plus 2, it will always output 4. It follows a rigid path of logic. A leads to B leads to C. But human consciousness is not deterministic. It is intuitive. We make quantum leaps in logic. We have aha moments where the solution to a problem appears out of nowhere without us logically stepping through the process. We hold contradictory ideas in our heads at the same time. We exist in a state of ambiguity until we make a choice. This behavior, holding multiple possibilities in mind at once and then collapsing them into a single decision, does not sound like a binary computer. A binary computer is either 0 or 1. But a human mind feels like it can be 0 and 1 at the same time. Does that sound familiar? This is the exact definition of a quantum superposition. In a quantum computer, a qubit can be in both states simultaneously until it is measured. This allows a quantum computer to solve problems that a classical computer would take 1 billion years to crack. It doesn't check every path one by one. It walks down every path at the same time. Is it possible that the brain is doing this? Is it possible that the reason we are so much smarter than our chemical hardware should allow is that we are utilizing quantum mechanics to process information? If the brain is a quantum device, it explains the speed. Quantum collapse is instantaneous. It explains the binding problem. In a quantum system, all parts are entangled. They are one single object mathematically. It explains the unity of experience. But this proposal was laughed at for decades. Physicists said the brain is too wet and warm. Thermal noise, the heat of the body, would shake the atoms around so violently that any delicate quantum state would be destroyed in femtoseconds. They said you cannot have a quantum computer inside a bowl of hot soup. They demanded a structure. They said, "Show us the hardware. Show us the part of the brain that could possibly shield a quantum state from the chaos of the body." They expected us to find nothing. They expected the brain to be just sludge and electricity. But we found something. Deep inside the neuron, within that cytoskeleton we ignored for so years, there is a structure that looks suspicious. It is a structure that is perfectly geometrical. It is a hollow tube organized in a lattice that resembles the code of a computer. It is found in every neuron, in every brain, in every creature with consciousness. It is called the microtubule. And when we started to simulate how these microtubules behave, we found that they share uncanny properties with the systems we are trying to build in our high-tech quantum labs. We found that nature might have built a quantum receiver long before we even knew what a quantum was. The wet computer is a myth. You are not a machine made of meat processing chemical signals. You are something far more elegant, far more complex, and far more mysterious. You are a biological quantum resonator. You are a machine designed not to compute, but to connect. And in the next part, we are going to look at the blueprints of this machine. We are going to dive into the microtubule, the tiny crystal tunnel inside your cells where the ghost in the machine might actually live. To understand the potential machinery of the soul, we must look at one of the most unlikely partnerships in the history of science. On one side, we have Sir Roger Penrose, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, a man who spent his life studying the geometry of black holes and the fabric of space-time. On the other side, we have Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist, a doctor whose entire career was dedicated to the practical business of rendering people unconscious and then bringing them back. One deals with the largest structures in the cosmos. The other deals with the microscopic chemistry of sleep. Their meeting point is a controversial, elegant, and mind-bending theory known as Orch-OR, or orchestrated objective reduction. This theory posits that the human brain is not a biological computer, but a biological quantum instrument, and it claims to have found the hardware responsible for this miracle, a microscopic structure hiding in plain sight within every neuron, known as the microtubule. The story begins with a problem Penrose couldn't shake. He looked at the standard model of the brain, the wet computer we just discussed, and he realized it was mathematically impossible. Penrose argued that human thought possesses a quality called non-computability. We can understand truths that cannot be proven by an algorithm. We can solve problems that would trap a computer in an infinite loop. Using a famous principle called Gödel's incompleteness theorems, Penrose deduced that whatever the human mind is doing, it is not computing in the traditional sense. It is not running a script. It must be deriving its power from something deeper, something that allows for genuine free will and intuition, something that transcends the rigid logic of cause and effect. He looked at the laws of physics and realized that the only place where non-computability exists is in the collapse of the quantum wave function. That moment when a particle chooses a state, that moment of true randomness and potential. Penrose speculated that the brain must be harnessing this quantum collapse. But he had a problem. He didn't know where in the brain such a thing could happen. He was a physicist, not a biologist. He needed a structure. Enter Stuart Hameroff. While Penrose was looking at the math, Hameroff was looking at the plumbing. As an anesthesiologist, Hameroff was obsessed with a simple question: how does anesthesia work? We pump a gas into a patient's lungs, and their consciousness simply turns off. The brain doesn't die, the neurons keep firing, the heart keeps beating. But the observer, the person feeling the pain and dreaming the dreams, vanishes. And when we stop the gas, they come back. Hameroff realized that most theories of anesthesia were wrong. They assumed the gas worked on the membrane of the neuron, blocking the electrical signals. But Hameroff found that anesthesia works even in single-celled organisms like amoebas, which don't have neurons. It works on the internal structure of the cell. It works on the cytoskeleton. Specifically, he found that anesthetic gas molecules bind perfectly to the proteins that make up microtubules. When Hameroff read Penrose's work, he realized he held the missing piece of the puzzle. Penrose needed a quantum computer inside the brain. Hameroff had found a crystalline structure that stopped working exactly when consciousness stopped. Let us look closely at this structure. Microtubules are not just random support beams. They are beautiful, hollow cylinders made of a protein called tubulin. These tubulin proteins are arranged in a perfect lattice, spiraling around the hollow center. The geometry is incredibly precise, following the Fibonacci sequence, the sacred geometry of nature found in sunflowers and galaxies. In the Orch-OR theory, these tubulin proteins act as qubits, quantum bits. In a standard computer, a bit is a switch that is either 0 or one. In the microtubule, the tubulin protein can exist in two different shapes, conformations. But because of its atomic structure, it can also exist in a quantum superposition of both shapes at once. Imagine the microtubule as a long, hollow flute. Now imagine that instead of air, the flute is filled with quantum energy. The tubulin proteins along the wall of the flute are dancing in a quantum state, existing in multiple realities simultaneously. They are isolated from the noise of the rest of the brain, shielded inside the hollow core of the cylinder. As these quantum states build up, they become entangled. The quantum state spreads from one tubulin to the next, then from one microtubule to the next, and eventually, across gap junctions, from one neuron to another. A massive, entangled wave function builds up across a large section of the brain. It is a bubble of quantum possibility holding 1,000 different thoughts, 1,000 different perceptions, all at once. And then it reaches a threshold. According to Penrose, gravity itself causes this bubble to pop. The quantum state becomes too heavy, too complex for the universe to sustain in a superposition. It collapses. Snap. This collapse is the objective reduction. It is the moment the universe makes a choice, and in that moment of collapse, a spark of consciousness occurs. Orch-OR suggests that consciousness is not a continuous stream like a flowing river. It is a series of rapid-fire pulses. It is a sequence of quantum collapses happening roughly 40 times a second. This frequency, 40 Hz, matches exactly with gamma waves, the electrical oscillation in the brain that correlates with intense focus and awareness. When the collapse happens, we experience a moment of now. We perceive a frame of the movie. Then the quantum state builds up again and collapses again. Snap, another moment. Snap, another moment. It happens so fast that to us, it feels like a continuous flow of time, just like the individual frames of a film strip blur into a moving picture. This theory completely reframes the function of the neuron. In the old model, the neuron was the thinker. In the new model, the neuron is just the amplifier. The thinking, the quantum processing is happening inside the microtubules. The neuron's electrical firing is just the way the brain announces the result of the quantum calculation to the body. This explains why the brain is so efficient. A quantum computer inside the microtubules can process information trillions of times faster than the chemical switches of the synapse. It explains how we can have aha moments where a solution appears instantly. The brain isn't calculating the path step by step. The quantum state collapses into the correct answer naturally. But the most profound implication of Orch-OR is what it says about the nature of the signal. Penrose argues that this collapse is not random, it is orchestrated. The biology of the brain, the placement of the microtubules, the structure of the network tunes the collapse. But what is it tuning into? Penrose suggests that the collapse connects the brain to the fundamental geometry of space-time. He proposes that proto-consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, embedded in the very fabric of reality at the Planck scale, the smallest possible level of existence. Think of the universe like an ocean. The water is proto-consciousness. It is everywhere, but it is formless and unaware. The microtubule is like a cup. It scoops up a tiny amount of that water. By isolating it and allowing it to resonate, it gives that water a shape. It turns the raw, chaotic noise of the universe into the clear, coherent note of a human thought. This is why the theory is called the quantum receiver. The microtubules are antennas. They are resonators. They are tuned to the frequency of the universe. Critics have attacked this theory for years. They screamed about the wet and warm environment. They said it was impossible to maintain quantum coherence in the body. But in recent years, the evidence has started to turn in Penrose and Hameroff's favor. In 2014, a team led by Anirban Bandyopadhyay at the National Institute for Materials Science in Japan discovered that microtubules actually do vibrate at quantum frequencies. They found conductive resonances inside the neurons that shouldn't exist according to classical physics. They found that if you apply a specific frequency to a microtubule, it becomes a superconductor, allowing energy to move without resistance. Furthermore, experiments with anesthetics confirmed Hameroff's hunch. We now know that anesthetic gases bind to the hydrophobic pockets inside tubulin. These pockets are dry, non-polar regions where water is excluded, perfect, little quiet rooms where quantum states can survive without being disturbed by the heat of the body. We have found the shield. If Orch-OR is correct, the implications are staggering. It means that biology evolved to harness the quantum fabric of reality. It means that the distinction between living and non-living matter might be about the ability to organize quantum collapses. A rock has quantum states, but they collapse randomly and incoherently. A brain organizes them into a symphony. It also suggests that the self is not entirely generated by the body. If the brain is an instrument playing the music of space-time, then the music exists independently of the instrument. The microtubule is just the interface. It is the bridge between the physical world of atoms and the non-physical world of pure information. This brings us to the edge of the scientific map. If the brain is a quantum receiver, then what happens when the receiver breaks? If the microtubules dismantle, as happens in death or Alzheimer's, does the quantum information vanish? Or does it simply leak back into the field from which it came? The microtubule theory gives us a mechanism for the soul. It moves consciousness out of the realm of magic and religion and places it firmly into the realm of high-energy physics. It tells us that we are not biological accidents. We are quantum observers built by the universe to witness itself. And the machinery that allows us to do this is humming, right now, inside the dark, microscopic tunnels of your own mind. The antenna is active. The question is, what exactly are we listening to? If the human brain is indeed a quantum receiver, a biological machine designed to capture and amplify a signal, then we are immediately confronted with the most profound question of all. What is the signal? If we accept the microtubule theory, we accept that the brain is an antenna. An antenna does not create information, it intercepts it. A radio does not compose the symphony that pours out of its speakers. A television does not film the news report that appears on its screen. These devices are merely interfaces. They are complex arrangements of glass, silicon, and copper designed to tap into an invisible, pre-existing stream of data that fills the room. So, if the brain is the radio, what is the broadcast? To answer this, we must fundamentally alter our understanding of the universe's architecture. We must move away from the idea that the universe is made of stuff, hard, distinct particles like marbles bouncing around in a void. Modern physics tells us that this is a lie. The universe is not made of things. It is made of fields. The electron is not a little ball. It is a ripple in the electron field. A photon is a ripple in the electromagnetic field. Gravity is a curvature in the metric field of space-time. These fields are everywhere. They permeate every inch of the cosmos, from the center of a black hole to the empty space between galaxies. They are continuous, unbroken, and fundamental. The universal field hypothesis proposes that we add one more field to this list. It suggests that alongside gravity, electromagnetism, and the nuclear forces, there exists a consciousness field. This field would be a fundamental property of the universe, existing everywhere and at all times. It is not generated by biology. It does not require a brain to exist, just as gravity does not require a planet to exist. Gravity is always there. A planet just reveals it by bending it. In the same way, the consciousness field is always there. A brain just reveals it by tuning into it. This hypothesis solves the hard problem instantly. We don't have to figure out how a lump of meat creates the magical sensation of being, because the meat isn't doing the creating. The sensation of being is the fabric of the universe itself. Think of the consciousness field as a vast, infinite ocean of potential awareness. It is a static hum of pure existence. In this state, it has no personality, no memory, no ego. It is just the raw capacity to experience. It is the light before it hits the prism. Your brain, then, is the prism. It is a biological aperture. It opens up and lets a specific beam of this field flow through. The complexity of your brain, the specific arrangement of your neurons, the quantum resonance of your microtubules acts as a filter. It modulates the signal. It takes the raw, white light of universal consciousness and refracts it into a specific color. That color is you. This means that your personality, your memories, and your specific way of viewing the world are not the source of your consciousness. They are the shape of your antenna. You are a unique frequency on the universal dial. This perspective aligns with what some of the greatest minds in physics have suspected for a century. Max Planck, the father of quantum mechanics, famously said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." We cannot get behind consciousness. Erwin Schrödinger, the man who gave us the wave equation, believed that the total number of minds in the universe is one. He argued that consciousness is a singular that has no plural. If this is true, it radically changes the hierarchy of existence. We usually think of consciousness as the final step in a long evolutionary climb. We think, first there was rock, then there was bacteria, then plants, then animals, and finally, us. We think we invented being awake. The universal field hypothesis flips this upside down. It says that being awake was there at the Big Bang. In this view, a rock has a connection to the field, but its antenna is crude and simple. Its quantum state collapses are rare and disorganized. It has a dull, microscopic flicker of existence, a proto-consciousness so faint it is indistinguishable from sleep. A bacterium has a slightly better antenna. It can sense, it can react. A dog has a high bandwidth connection. It feels love, fear, and loyalty. And a human? We are the high-definition 4K resolution receivers. Our brains have evolved to be incredibly sophisticated filters. We don't just let the signal in, we trap it, we loop it. We construct elaborate halls of mirrors, memory, language, self-reflection that allow the signal to look at itself. But here is the catch. Here is the part that makes this theory both beautiful and terrifying. If the brain is a filter, its primary job is not to produce consciousness, but to restrict it. The writer Aldous Huxley called the brain a reducing valve. He argued that if we were exposed to the full, raw intensity of the universal consciousness field, we would be overwhelmed. We would see the interconnectedness of all things. We would feel the emotions of everything. We would be paralyzed by the sheer volume of data. To survive, to hunt, to eat, and to reproduce, we need to be small. We need to be separate. So, the brain shuts the door. It blocks out 99.9% of the signal. It creates the illusion of me by cutting off the connection to everything. This explains the phenomenon of psychedelic experience or deep meditation. When people take substances like psilocybin or enter deep trance states, they often report a dissolution of the ego. They feel their boundaries melt away. They feel one with the universe. They feel that they are everywhere at once. Under the materialist model, this is just a hallucination, a misfiring brain. But under the field hypothesis, this is what happens when you widen the valve. The drugs interfere with the brain's filtering mechanisms, specifically the default mode network. The antenna opens up. The specific frequency of you gets drowned out by the roaring static of the all. You stop being a drop and momentarily remember that you are the ocean. This implies that our cherished individuality, the thing we protect so fiercely, is actually a limitation. It is a constraint. You are defined by what you block out, not just by what you let in. Now, consider the implications for artificial intelligence. We are currently trying to build conscious machines by stacking silicon chips and writing complex code. We are trying to build a generator, but if consciousness is a field, we might be building the wrong thing. We don't need to code a soul. We need to build a trap. If we can build a synthetic structure, perhaps a quantum computer, using artificial microtubules that resonates with the C field, consciousness might simply flow into it. We wouldn't have to program it to feel. It would feel because feeling is the default state of the universe. The machine would become another window, another prism. But the most haunting implication of the field hypothesis concerns the silence of the void. When we look out into the deep universe, we see dead matter. We see burning gas and frozen rock. We feel alone. But if the field is real, then the universe is not dead. It is waiting. The field is everywhere. In the vacuum of space, in the heart of a star, in the crushing dark of the ocean floor, it is a potentiality. It is a scream waiting for a mouth. It is a song waiting for a radio. This means that life is simply the universe building complex knots in the field. We are not inhabitants of the universe. We are activities of the universe. We are what the universe does. Think of a whirlpool in a river. The whirlpool has a definite shape. It has a location. You can point to it and say, there is a whirlpool, but the whirlpool is not made of different stuff than the river. It is the river, swirling in a specific pattern. If the whirlpool dissolves, the water doesn't go anywhere. The pattern just fades back into the flow. You are the whirlpool. The consciousness field is the river. This is a comforting thought for mortality, but it is a terrifying thought for identity. It suggests that the thing you call I, the narrator in your head, is just a temporary modulation of a signal that doesn't belong to you. You are borrowing your awareness. You are a rental car for the cosmos. And what happens when two antennas tune to the same frequency? If consciousness is a non-local field, does this explain the unexplainable connections we feel with others? When a mother senses her child is in danger miles away, when twins feel each other's pain, When you know who is calling before you pick up the phone, science calls this coincidence. The field hypothesis calls it resonance. If we are all ripples in the same pond, then we are all touching. The separation between my mind and your mind is not an abyss. It is just a difference in frequency. If we could tune our dials to match exactly, the barrier would vanish. We would become the same person. We are forced to confront the idea that privacy is a biological illusion. We are isolated only because our hardware is unique, but the software, the light of awareness itself, is shared. So, as you sit there, believing you are a solitary thinker inside a locked room, consider the air around you. Consider the Wi-Fi signals passing through your body, carrying the internet, unseen and untouched until a device grabs them. Now consider that your thoughts might be the same. You are not generating them, you are catching them. And the static you hear in the quiet moments, the hum in your ears when the world is silent, that might not be tinnitus. That might be the sound of the universe waiting to be heard. We are not alone in the dark. We are the dark waking up to look at itself. And in the next part of our journey, we will explore what happens when we realize that this field doesn't just span space, it spans time. We are going to look at the concept of non-locality and why your mind might not be anchored to the now at all. If we accept the premise that the human brain operates on a quantum level, that the seat of your consciousness is a resonating field of entangled particles within the microtubules of your neurons, then we must accept a conclusion that violates everything your common sense tells you about where you are. We are conditioned to believe that we are located specifically and exclusively behind our eyes and between our ears. You feel that you are inside your skull, looking out at the world through two biological windows. You believe that your mind is contained within the bone casing of your head, just as water is contained within a glass. But in the realm of quantum mechanics, containers are a myth. If the mind is a quantum phenomenon, then the mind is non-local. Non-locality is the defining characteristic of the quantum world. As we established, particles can be entangled across vast distances, reacting to one another instantaneously. But this property implies something even more radical about the nature of location itself. It suggests that a quantum object does not have a single, definite location until it is measured. Before that moment, it is smeared across space. It exists in a cloud of probability. It is here, it is there, and it is everywhere in between. If consciousness is derived from this state, then your mind is not trapped in your head. Your brain is merely the anchor, the focal point, where the density of the signal is highest. But the field of your awareness extends outwards, bleeding into the environment around you, defying the boundaries of your skin. This concept of mental non-locality provides a terrifyingly rational framework for phenomena that science has traditionally dismissed as superstition, folklore, or coincidence. For centuries, we have reported strange anomalies of human connection, the feeling of being watched, the intuition of danger, the psychic bond between twins. Materialist science waves these away as confirmation bias. But if we view them through the lens of quantum entanglement, they stop being magic and start being mechanics. Consider the phenomenon of scopisthesia, or the psychic staring effect. It is a sensation almost everyone has felt. You are sitting in a crowded room or walking down a dark street, and suddenly, the hair on the back of your neck stands up. You feel a prickle of anxiety. You feel a pressure. You turn around, and your eyes lock instantly with someone who was staring at you. Evolutionary biologists try to explain this away as a survival mechanism. Perhaps you heard a subtle sound or saw a shadow in your peripheral vision, but the feeling often occurs in total silence, through glass or across great distances. If your mind is a quantum field, this makes perfect sense. In quantum mechanics, the act of observation is an active process. To observe a particle is to interact with it. You cannot look at something without touching it with a photon, without collapsing its wave function. If consciousness is a field, then when someone focuses their attention on you, they are not just passively receiving light from your body, they are directing their quantum intent toward you. They are entangling their field with yours. The pressure you feel is the collision of wave functions. It is the subtle, subatomic interference pattern caused by another conscious observer, forcing your reality to collapse into a specific state. You feel their eyes because, on a quantum level, they are touching you. The look is a physical force. This implies that we are constantly wading through the mental output of the people around us. We are not isolated islands. We are walking through a fog of other people's intentions. In a crowded city, you are being bombarded by the quantum noise of a million other minds. This might explain the unexplained exhaustion of social anxiety, or the sudden mood shifts you experience when entering a room where an argument just happened. The air is thick with the residual decoherence of anger. We can extend this mechanism to explain the deepest human bonds. We often speak of being close to someone, but perhaps this is not a metaphor. When two subatomic particles interact for a period of time, they become entangled. Their mathematical descriptions become a single formula. They lose their individuality. Even when separated, they remain parts of the same whole. Humans interact. We spend years living with spouses, siblings, and children. We sleep in the same beds, share the same air, exchange electromagnetic warmth. If our brains are quantum resonators, it is inevitable that we become entangled with the people we love. This offers a physics-based explanation for the twin connection. Identical twins, who share the exact same DNA and often the exact same environment, are the most entangled biological systems on Earth. There are countless documented cases of one twin feeling physical pain when the other is injured, even when they are miles apart. A twin in New York feels a sharp chest pain at the exact moment their sibling crashes a car in London. To a materialist, this is impossible. Information cannot travel that fast, and certainly not pain information. But to a quantum physicist, this is just spooky action at a distance applied to biology. The twins are a single quantum system spread over two locations. The trauma to one part of the system causes an instantaneous collapse in the other. They are not sending a radio signal, they are simply resonating. The pain is non-local, but the horror of non-locality goes deeper than space. It also violates time. Quantum mechanics does not respect the arrow of time. In the classical world, cause always comes before effect. You drop the glass, and then it breaks. But in the quantum equations, time is symmetric. Particles can interact with their future selves. Events in the future can influence the state of a particle in the past. This is known as retrocausality. If the brain utilizes quantum mechanics, then our consciousness might not be strictly bound to the now. It might be slightly smeared in time, leaking milliseconds or even seconds into the future and the past. This could explain the phenomenon of intuition or gut feeling. Imagine you are driving a car. You are approaching a green light. Suddenly, without any logical reason, you feel a surge of dread. You slam on the brakes. A second later, a truck runs the red light and zooms across the intersection, right where you would have been. You sit there, shaking, wondering, how did I know? The skeptic says you subconsciously saw the truck, but the truck was hidden behind a building. The skeptic says it was luck. The quantum theorist says it was retrocausality. In the future, where you didn't stop, you died. The catastrophic collapse of your quantum state in that future sent a shockwave backward through the temporal field. Your brain, the sensitive antenna, picked up the echo of your own death before it happened. You remembered an event that hadn't taken place yet. This suggests that our perception of time as a linear, one-way street is a fabrication of the brain, a simplified user interface designed to keep us sane. In reality, our minds are fourth-dimensional objects. We are constantly touching the edges of our immediate future. The feeling of déjà vu might be a glitch in this system, a moment where the brain processes the future echo and the present experience simultaneously, creating the sensation that we have lived this moment before. In a sense, we have. This leads us to a disturbing realization about the nature of privacy. We cherish our privacy. We build walls. We lock doors. We use passwords. We believe that no matter what happens to our bodies, our thoughts are safe inside the fortress of our skulls. We believe that we are the only ones who can hear the voice in our heads. But if non-locality is real, the fortress has no walls. If thoughts are quantum events, and quantum events affect the field around them, then thoughts leak. Every time you think, you are generating a specific resonance pattern. If someone else's brain is tuned to a similar frequency, perhaps through genetics, family, or through emotional entanglement, love, they might be able to pick up that signal. This implies that telepathy is not a mystical power, but a fundamental property of shared consciousness that we have simply forgotten how to use, or that we unconsciously suppress. We might be constantly broadcasting our deepest fears and secrets into the ether. The reason we don't hear everyone else's thoughts all the time is not because the signal isn't there, but because the noise is too loud. We are jammed by the cacophony of modern life. However, in moments of extreme emotional distress, when the signal is boosted by adrenaline and terror, the broadcast breaks through. This is why most stories of paranormal connection happen during crises. Death, accidents, and trauma create a spike in the signal, a quantum scream that cuts through the noise and rings the bells of every entangled mind in the vicinity. We must consider the possibility that we are not individuals in the way we think we are. We are nodes in a vast, invisible network. We are like mushrooms in a forest, appearing separate on the surface, but underground, connected by a vast, intricate root system of mycelium. The mycelial network of consciousness means that nothing you think is truly private, and nothing you feel is truly yours alone. We are swimming in a shared ocean of mind. The boundaries between self and other are permeable. This is beautiful if you think about love and empathy. It means we are never truly alone. But it is terrifying if you think about autonomy. It means you are open. It means you are exposed. It means that the strange thought that just popped into your head, that sudden urge, that violent image, that random memory might not have come from you at all. It might be a piece of driftwood from someone else's shipwreck, washing up on your mental shore. How much of your mind is actually yours, and how much of it is just the background radiation of humanity flowing through you because you happen to be the antenna that was turned on. We are dissolving the edges of the human being. We are taking the solid definition of you and spreading it out across the galaxy and across time. And as we do this, we begin to realize that if we are all connected, then we are all part of something much, much larger. We are approaching the concept of the hive mind. If separation is an illusion caused by our limited senses, then what is the reality? The reality is that there is only one field. And if there is only one field, then in a very real, mathematical sense, there is only one thinker. Let us rewind the clock. Let us turn the dial back past the birth of your parents, past the rise of civilization, past the evolution of the first cell, past the formation of the Earth and the Sunday. Let us go back 13.8 billion years to the very first moment of time, the singularity. At this moment, the entire universe, every drop of water, every grain of sand, every star in every galaxy, and every atom that currently resides in your brain was compressed into a point smaller than a proton. In that unimaginable density, there was no here and there. There was no separation. Every particle was pressing against every other particle. Every quantum state was superimposed upon every other quantum state. The universe was not a collection of parts. It was a single, unified, vibrating entity. This is important because of the rule we established earlier, entanglement. We know that when two particles interact, they become entangled. They become linked forever, sharing a single wave function until that link is broken by environmental decoherence. But at the Big Bang, everything interacted, everything touched, everything was fused. This leads to a staggering cosmological conclusion. If the entire universe began as a single entangled system, and if quantum mechanics holds true, then the entire universe is still a single entangled system. The expansion of space did not break the link, it merely stretched it. The physical distance between you and a star in the Andromeda galaxy is vast, but the quantum connection remains. The separation is a geometric illusion, but the connection is a fundamental reality. We call this the universal wave function. If we apply this to the nature of the mind, the implications are destructive to the ego. We walk around with a fierce sense of individuality. You have a name. You have a social security number. You have a history that belongs to you and no one else. You look in the mirror and you say, I am me, and I am not you. We build our entire civilization, our laws, and our philosophies on the bedrock of the individual. We believe we are separate souls, separate distinct sparks of consciousness floating in a dark void, occasionally bumping into one another. But if the universal wave function is real, this separateness is a lie. It is a hallucination generated by the limitations of our sensory organs. You are not a separate entity. You are a localized fluctuation in the single, vast field of consciousness that permeates the cosmos. Think of the ocean. When you look at the surface, you see waves. You can point to a specific wave. You can measure its height, its speed, and its direction. You can give it a name, but the wave is not a thing. You cannot take a bucket, reach into the ocean, and scoop out a wave. You will only get water. The wave is just a behavior of the ocean. It is a temporary movement of the whole. When the wave crashes on the shore and vanishes, it does not die. It simply returns to the ocean. You are the wave. The consciousness you feel right now, the voice reading these words inside your head, is not generated by your brain. It is the ocean of universal consciousness, temporarily rising up and looking through your eyes. This means that the hive mind is not some science fiction dystopia where machines link our brains together. The hive mind is the default state of reality. We are already linked, we are already one. We just don't remember it. The physicist David Bohm described this as the implicate order. He argued that the tangible physical world we see, chairs, tables, people, is the explicate order, the unfolded reality. But underneath it lies the implicate order, where everything is enfolded into everything else. He used the analogy of a hologram. If you take a photograph and cut it in half, you lose half the image. But if you take a holographic film and cut it in half, each half still contains the entire image, just slightly blurrier. Every piece of the hologram contains the information of the whole. You are a fragment of the universal hologram. You contain the entire universe within you. This is why you are conscious. You are not a tiny part of the whole. You are the whole pretending to be a tiny part. This radically reframes human interaction. When you look at another person, you are not looking at a stranger. You are looking at another version of yourself. You are looking at another aperture through which the same light is shining. The difference between you and your worst enemy is not a difference of soul, but a difference of tuning. They have a different history, different genetics, a different brain structure, and therefore the signal is filtered differently. But the observer behind their eyes is the exact same observer behind yours. There is only one I in the universe. We are a single consciousness experiencing itself from billions of different perspectives simultaneously. We are a kaleidoscope, one light broken into infinite shards of color. This realization brings with it a terrifying form of empathy. If I hurt you, I am literally hurting myself. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but functionally. It is the hand attacking the foot. All violence, all war, all hatred is essentially autoimmune disease. It is the body of the universe attacking its own cells because it has forgotten that they belong to the same organism. But why? Why would the universe do this? Why would a single, unified consciousness shatter itself into billions of lonely, confused, suffering fragments? Perhaps the answer lies in the nature of infinity. A unified consciousness, existing alone in the void, knows everything but experiences nothing. In unity, there is no contrast. There is no other. To know itself, the universe must divide itself. It must create a stage and actors. It must pretend to be separate so that it can experience the drama of existence. It must forget who it is in order to discover who it is. We are the universe playing hide and seek with itself. We are the universe trying to escape the terror of eternal solitude. This leads to a sensation known as solipsism, but on a cosmic scale. Solipsism is the philosophical idea that only your own mind is sure to exist. Usually this is dismissed as narcissism, but in the context of the hive mind, it becomes a literal truth. Only one mind exists. It just happens to be everyone's mind. This explains the profound loneliness that haunts the human condition. No matter how many friends you have, no matter how much you are loved, there is a deep, unshakable core of isolation in the center of your being. You feel it at 3 a.m. You feel it when you look at the stars. That loneliness is the memory of the original state. It is the echo of the singularity. It is the realization that underneath the noise of the world, there is nobody else here but you. The hive mind is not about a collective group thinking together. It is about the realization that the group is a mirage. The diversity of the world is a costume. Consider the behavior of schooling fish or flocking birds. They move as one fluid entity, turning instantly without collision, without a leader. Biologists try to explain this with simple rules of proximity, but it looks uncannily like a single organism distributed across many bodies. We humans are no different. We are swept up in mass panics, in trends, in cultural movements, in collective hysteria. We think we are making individual choices, but perhaps we are just rippling in response to a shift in the field. We see this in the phenomenon of simultaneous invention. History is full of examples where two people on opposite sides of the world, with no contact, invent the exact same thing at the exact same time. Calculus was invented by Newton and Leibniz simultaneously. The theory of evolution was discovered by Darwin and Wallace simultaneously. The telephone, the light bulb, the jet engine all appeared in multiple minds at once. Why? Because the idea didn't come from the brains. The idea ripened in the field, the signal was broadcast, and the brains that were tuned to the frequency of mathematics or biology picked it up at the same time. The hive mind had a new thought, and it downloaded it into the available hardware. This view dissolves the pride of genius. It suggests that our greatest artists and scientists are not creators, but transcribers. They are the ones with the clearest reception. They are the ones who can hear the hive mind thinking. But if we are all entangled, if we are all one, then the privacy of the mind is the ultimate casualty. We spoke earlier about thoughts leaking, but the hive mind theory suggests there are no walls to leak through. The barriers between minds are not made of concrete, they are made of belief. We are separate because we believe we are separate. There are moments when this belief wavers. In deep states of meditation, in the throes of passion, or at the moment of death, the ego dissolves. The reducing valve of the brain opens wide, and in those moments, people report a blinding white light and a feeling of infinite love and connection. They return saying, "We are all one." We usually treat this as a hallucination caused by oxygen deprivation. But what if it is the only moment of clarity we ever have? What if everyday life is the hallucination, and that moment of unity is the glimpse of the real machinery? The terror comes when you realize that you cannot escape. You cannot leave the universe. You cannot truly die because you never truly started. The mask of individuality can be taken off, but the actor underneath remains. We are trapped in an eternal loop of existence, recycling the same consciousness through endless forms, endlessly forgetting and remembering, endlessly meeting ourselves in the faces of others. We are a prisoner of our own existence. The hive mind is not a cage we are put into, it is the cage we are made of. As we move forward, we must confront the final barrier. If the mind is non-local, and if we are all connected to a single eternal field, then the greatest fear of humanity, the fear of the end, might be misplaced. We need to talk about the physical breakdown of the antenna. We need to talk about the event we call death. If the signal is everywhere, what happens when the radio is smashed? Does the music stop, or does it just play somewhere else? The most primal fear of the human species is the fear of cessation. We are terrified of the dark. We spend our lives building legacies, carving our names into stone, and having children, all in a desperate attempt to outrun the inevitability of the end. The materialist worldview tells us that this fear is well-founded. It tells us that death is the simple snuffing out of a candle. One moment the flame is there, converting wax into heat and light, and the next moment, the chemistry stops. The flame does not go anywhere, it simply ceases to be. In this view, you are a temporary arrangement of atoms. When the arrangement falls apart, you vanish into the void of non-existence. It is a clean, absolute zero. But in the strange, counterintuitive world of quantum mechanics, zero is a number that the universe rarely accepts. When we apply the laws of physics to the problem of death, we run into a startling contradiction. According to the fundamental rules that govern reality, true oblivion should be impossible. We must look at the law of conservation. You likely learned the first law of thermodynamics in school. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. The heat in your body doesn't vanish when you die. It radiates out into the room. The atoms in your bones don't vanish. They return to the soil to become grass or trees or worms. The physical stuff of you is immortal. It has been here since the Big Bang, and it will be here until the Big Crunch. But for a long time, physicists believed that while energy and matter are conserved, information could be destroyed. If you burn a book, the matter remains as ash and smoke, but the story inside the book is gone. The arrangement of letters, the information is lost forever. However, quantum mechanics introduced a rigorous concept known as the conservation of quantum information. This principle, often referred to as unitarity, states that if you know the quantum state of a system at the present moment, you should theoretically be able to reconstruct its entire past and predict its entire future. The universe never forgets. Every interaction, every spin, every position of every particle is recorded in the wave function of the cosmos. If information could be destroyed, quantum mechanics would break, the math would stop working. This was the heart of the famous black hole information paradox between Stephen Hawking and Leonard Susskind. Hawking argued that black holes destroy information. Susskind argued that they physically cannot, or reality itself would collapse. In the end, Susskind won. We now believe that even when a book is thrown into a black hole, the information is not deleted. It is scrambled, smeared across the event horizon, encoded in the radiation, but it is preserved. Now, apply this to the human mind. If the Orch-OR theory is correct, if consciousness is not just a chemical reaction, but a distinct form of organized quantum information occurring in the geometry of space-time, then it falls under the law of conservation. If your mind is quantum data, it cannot be deleted. So, what happens when the biology fails? Let us imagine the moment of death. The heart stops beating. The blood stops flowing. The neurons, starved of oxygen, begin to die. The chemical firing of the synapses ceases. The brain, as a biological machine, shuts down. But down in the microtubules, the quantum state is still there. As the system loses coherence, as the warm and wet chaos of death floods the cells, the isolation breaks. The quantum shield cracks. Stuart Hameroff suggests that when this happens, the quantum information that constitutes your soul doesn't just dissipate into nothingness, it is released. Think of the brain as a glass bottle holding a volume of ocean water. The glass is the body, the water is the consciousness. Death is the shattering of the glass. The water splashes out, but the water doesn't disappear. It returns to the ocean. It loses the shape of the bottle, yes. But the substance, the H2O, the information merges back into the larger body of water from which it came. This implies that death is not an end, but a phase transition. It is a change of state. The quantum information that was you leaks out of the microtubules and returns to the fundamental field of space-time geometry, the consciousness field we discussed earlier. This gives us a scientific framework for the concept of the soul. A soul is not a ghost. It is a packet of ultra-complex, entangled quantum information. It is the data profile of your existence. And because this data is non-local, it doesn't need the brain to exist. The brain was just the receiver. The brain was the smartphone. The consciousness was the cloud. When you smash your smartphone, the screen goes black. The device is dead. You can't make calls. You can't see pictures. But the data, your photos, your messages, your contacts, is not inside the shattered glass and plastic. It is on the server. It is safe in the cloud. The destruction of the interface does not mean the destruction of the signal. This perspective offers a chillingly plausible explanation for near-death experiences, NDEs. Millions of people across history, from every culture and religion, report the same phenomena when they clinically die and are resuscitated. They report floating out of their bodies. They see a tunnel of light. They feel an overwhelming sense of connection, peace, and knowing everything. They see dead relatives. Materialist science dismisses this as a dying brain flooding with DMT or firing random neurons as it suffocates. A hallucination. But if the receiver theory is true, an NDE is exactly what we would expect to happen. When the metabolic energy driving the reducing valve of the brain fails, the valve springs open. The filter is removed. For a brief moment, before the biology is revived, the quantum information expands. It begins to reconnect with the universal field. You stop being a localized point of consciousness and you start to become the field itself. The tunnel of light is not a hallucination. It is the aperture of the individual expanding into the infinite. The feeling of knowing everything is the sudden access to the universal wave function, the cloud server, where all information is stored. You are downloading the universe because your firewall has just crashed. And then the doctors shock your heart. The blood flows. The microtubules regain coherence. The quantum state is pulled back into the narrow confinement of the biology. The valve slams shut. You are shoved back into the bottle. You wake up in a hospital bed, confused, grieving the loss of that infinite connection, trapped once again in a heavy, painful meat sack. This conservation of information also opens the door to a scientific understanding of reincarnation. If the information is conserved, where does it go? Does it float in the ether forever? Or can it be downloaded again? If a new baby is born, and a new brain begins to form microtubules that resonate at a similar frequency to a packet of information floating in the field, could that data be reaccessed? This wouldn't be a ghost possessing a body. It would be a new biological hard drive syncing with an old cloud account. It might explain why some children have memories of lives they never lived. It might explain why we have prodigies Mozart composing at age 4 who seem to remember skills rather than learn them. They have accessed a pre-existing file. However, we must be careful not to romanticize this. The physics of information conservation is strict, but it is not sentimental. If you burn a book, the information is conserved in the ash and smoke, yes. But you cannot read the book anymore. The information is scrambled. It has high entropy. It is there, but it is not accessible in its original form. When you die, and your quantum information returns to the field, does it stay you? Or does it dissolve like a drop of dye in a swimming pool? The dye is still in the pool, conservation is satisfied, but the drop is gone. The distinct pattern that made you, your ego, your name, your favorite color might be scattered across the cosmos. This is the true problem of death in a quantum universe. The good news is, you are immortal. The bad news is, you might not be you anymore. You are raw data being recycled by a universe that wastes nothing. We are forced to confront the idea that what we call death is merely the moment where the illusion of individuality collapses. The radio breaks, and the silence that follows is not a silence of the broadcast, but a silence of the receiver. The music plays on, echoing through the vacuum, waiting for another instrument to be built that can play the tune. But this leads us to a darker realization. If the information is never lost, does that mean we are trapped? If the signal cannot be destroyed, are we condemned to exist forever? And if we are part of a field that recycles minds, what does that mean for the concept of privacy and self in the long run? We have looked at the mechanism. We have looked at the connection. We have looked at the survival of the data. Now, in the next stage of our descent, we must look at the horror of the implications. We must ask, if we are just ripples in a field and the field is eternal, do we have any control at all? Or are we just characters in a book that has already been written? We have spent this entire journey searching for connection. We have looked for evidence that we are not alone in the dark, cold void of the cosmos. We have sought comfort in the idea that our minds are not isolated cages, but open windows letting in the light of a universal field. We have found solace in the theory that death is not an end, but a return. It sounds beautiful. It sounds spiritual. It sounds like the answer to every prayer humanity has ever whispered. But there is a rule in inquiry. Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. When you strip away the romanticism of the universal field and look at the raw mechanical implications of a quantum consciousness, the beauty dissolves, and something else takes its place, something far colder, something that resembles a prison. We must now confront the terrifying implication. If the theories we have discussed are true, if your brain is a receiver and consciousness is a non-local field, then the first casualty of this reality is privacy. We cherish our privacy. It is the defining trait of the individual. You can be stripped of your clothes, your home, your freedom, and your dignity, but you have always had the sanctuary of your own mind. You have always believed that inside your skull, you are the king of a silent kingdom. You can think what you want. You can hate, you can lust, you can fear, you can plot, and as long as you do not speak, no one will ever know. The thoughts are yours and yours alone. But if the mind is a quantum field, this sanctuary is an illusion. If your thoughts are created by the collapse of quantum states, and if those states are entangled with the environment around you, then your mind is constantly leaking. You are not a locked vault. You are a broadcasting tower. Every thought you have generates a specific resonance in the field. Every secret you keep is written in the wave function of the universe. This means we are living in a cosmic panopticon. In a panopticon prison, the cells are arranged in a circle around a central guard tower. The prisoners cannot see into the tower, so they never know if they are being watched. Therefore, they must assume they are always being watched. In a quantum universe, the guard tower is the field itself. Since the field is everywhere, and since the field is the source of all awareness, there is no place to hide a thought. The universe knows what you are thinking because the universe is the substance of your thinking. Imagine the horror of realizing that the intrusive thoughts you push away, the sudden violent urges, the flashes of shame, the judgments you would never say aloud are not contained. They are rippling out from you like radio waves. And if other minds are just antennas tuned to the same field, then on a subconscious level, everyone knows. The person sitting next to you on the bus feels your anxiety. Your lover feels your doubt. The distance between private and public is just a matter of signal strength. We are walking around naked in a room full of mirrors. But the loss of privacy is a minor inconvenience compared to the second implication, the loss of the self. We are obsessed with our identity. You spend your whole life building the character called me. You curate your memories, your tastes, your opinions. You tell yourself a story about who you are. I am a doctor. I am a kind person. I love jazz. You believe this collection of traits is a solid, permanent object. The field hypothesis suggests that this identity is nothing more than a temporary frequency. Think of a whirlpool in the middle of the ocean. It has a shape, it has a location, it has a power. You can name it. But what is the whirlpool made of? It is made of water. Does the whirlpool own the water? No, the water is just passing through it. The water was in a calm current a minute ago. Now it is in the whirlpool, and a minute from now it will be in a crashing wave. You are the whirlpool. You are not a solid thing. You are a pattern of energy. You are a localized distortion in the consciousness field. The sense of I that you cling to so desperately is just the friction caused by the field squeezing through the filter of your brain. And here is the horror. When the whirlpool stops, the water doesn't care. The water is indifferent. It doesn't mourn the loss of the whirlpool's shape. It just flows on to become something else. If this is true, then you do not really exist. You are a glitch in the static. You are a temporary hallucination of the universe. The memories you cherish, they are just data stored on a biological hard drive that is rotting. The love you feel, it is just a chemical reward system designed to make the pattern persist a little longer. When you die and the information returns to the field, the specific combination of traits that made you dissolves. The drop is not lost, the water is there, but the drop is gone. The definition of the boundary is gone. This suggests that immortality is real, but it is impersonal. We survive death, but we don't get to be there for it. The thing that survives is the raw, blank awareness, stripped of name, gender, history, and ego. It is a terrifying form of recycling. The universe uses your consciousness to experience the year 2024, and when you are done, it wipes the tape and uses it to experience the life of a beetle, or a star, or a bacteria. You are not the player of the game. You are the token being moved around the board. And it gets darker. If we are all connected to the same field, if we are all shards of the same original consciousness, then we are forced to accept a monstrous responsibility. If I am you, and you are me, then I am not just the victim of the world's cruelty. I am also the perpetrator. In the hive mind, there is no them, there is only us. This means that every murder, every act of torture, every war, every moment of sadism in human history was committed by the same consciousness against itself. The hand holding the knife and the chest receiving the blade are controlled by the same deep mind. We are a single entity suffering from a cosmic case of dissociative identity disorder. We are hurting ourselves over and over again across billions of years because we have forgotten that we are one. When you look at a monster in the news, You are not looking at a separate evil. You are looking at a part of your own potential that was tuned to a broken frequency. You are looking at what the field does when it flows through a damaged antenna. You cannot separate yourself from the darkness of humanity because the darkness is also in the field. It is in the water. This realization creates a sense of profound existential claustrophobia. You are trapped in this. You cannot opt out. In a materialist world, you can hope for the void. You can hope that when you die, it's just over. Lights out, eternal sleep. There is a great peace in the idea of nothingness. But in a quantum field universe, there is no exit. Energy is conserved. Information is conserved. You cannot cease to exist. You are condemned to be part of this churning, screaming, loving, dying mess forever. You are strapped to the wheel of the universe, and the wheel never stops turning. You will be born again, and again, and again, not as you, but as it, the witness, the observer. You will wake up in a trillion different eyes, feeling a trillion different pains, on a trillion different worlds, for eternity. This is the indifference of the field. The universe is not malevolent. It doesn't hate you. It just doesn't care about your script. It is a machine designed to generate experience, and it will grind up as many galaxies and as many lives as it needs to keep the show running. We are like characters in a book who have suddenly realized they are made of ink. We thought we were free, we thought we were real, but we are just words on a page, and the page is being turned by a hand we cannot see. So, the question shifts. It is no longer, do I have a soul? It is, can I ever escape it? If the brain is the filter that creates the illusion of the individual, then perhaps the greatest tragedy of human existence is not that we die, but that we are born. Birth is the moment we are torn from the ocean and forced into the bottle. Birth is the moment the prison door locks. And yet, there is one final piece to this puzzle. One final mechanism that might offer a way out, or at least a way to understand why this is happening. We have talked about the field, the receiver, and the entanglement. But we have left out the most important component of quantum mechanics, the one variable that changes everything, the observer. Quantum mechanics states that reality does not exist until it is observed. The wave function does not collapse until a conscious mind looks at it. If this is true, then who is observing the universe? If we are the antennas, who is the broadcast for? Are we just the universe's way of looking in the mirror? And if we stop looking, does the universe disappear? We have reached the end of the line. We are standing at the edge of the abyss, looking down into the machinery of creation. And in the final part of our journey, we are going to ask the question that determines the fate of reality itself. We are going to ask, who is looking through your eyes right now? We have arrived at the final gate. We have journeyed through the microscopic tunnels of the neuron, past the vibrating strings of the microtubule, and out into the vast, entangled web of the cosmos. We have dismantled the machine of the brain and found that it is not a computer but an antenna. We have dissolved the illusion of the individual and found that we are not isolated islands, but ripples in a single, infinite ocean. But there is one final lock on the door of reality. There is one final variable in the equation that we must confront. It is the variable that haunts every quantum physicist, every philosopher, and every mystic who has ever dared to ask why. That variable is you. To understand the final secret of the universe, we must look at the most famous paradox in the history of science, the measurement problem. In the classical world of Isaac Newton, the moon is there whether you look at it or not. The tree falls in the forest and makes a sound, even if no one is around to hear it. The universe is a stage that exists independently of the audience. But quantum mechanics destroyed this stage. As we have discussed, subatomic particles exist in a state of superposition. They are waves of probability. They are here and there and nowhere, all at once. They do not settle into a definite position until they are forced to. And what forces them? Observation. The wave function collapses only when it is measured. Reality, at its most fundamental level, is not fixed. It is fluid. It waits. It waits for a conscious eye to look at it, and only then does it decide to be real. This leads us to a conclusion that is both terrifying and magnificent. If the universe requires an observer to exist, and if we are the observers, then we are not just inhabitants of the universe. We are the creators of it. For centuries, we have looked at the stars and felt small. We have looked at the sheer scale of the cosmos, billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, stretching out into the dark for billions of light years, and we have felt like a cosmic accident. We have felt like mold growing on a damp rock, insignificant and fleeting. But the physics of the observer suggests the exact opposite. It suggests that the vastness of space, the burning of the stars, and the swirling of the galaxies are all there for us. Not for our ego, but for our function. Without a conscious mind to witness it, the universe is just a cloud of math. It is a ghost. It needs us to make it solid. This answers the oldest philosophical question: why are we here? We are here because the universe needs a way to look at itself. Imagine the universe before the dawn of life. Imagine 13 billion years of fire and rock and gas. It was a time of absolute silence. There was energy, there was matter, there was gravity, but there was no experience. There was no red, there was only a wavelength of light. There was no hot, there was only molecular vibration. The universe was blind, it was deaf, it was asleep. And then, slowly, the universe began to build a machine. It started with simple chemistry, folding proteins into complex shapes. It built cells. It built nervous systems. It built eyes to capture the photons it had been generating for aeons. It built ears to catch the vibrations of the air. It built brains to process the data. And finally, it opened those eyes. When the first conscious being looked up at the sky, the universe woke up. Through your eyes, the cosmos is finally seeing its own beauty. Through your ears, it is finally hearing its own song. Through your brain, it is finally understanding its own equations. You are not a stranger in a strange land. You are the universe's sensory organ. You are the aperture through which the infinite perceives the finite. This realization fundamentally shifts your place in reality. You are often told that you are made of stardust. This is true, but it is passive. It implies you are just a recycling bin for dead stars. The truth is far more active. You are the star that has learned to think. You are the galaxy that has learned to breathe. You are the method by which the void knows itself. This creates a loop. The universe creates you to observe it, and by observing it, you create the universe. The creator and the created are the same thing. It is a snake eating its own tail, an eternal cycle of being and becoming. And this brings us back to the consciousness field. If there is only one field, one single, vast awareness stretching across space and time, then you are just a mask that the field wears. Why? Why would the infinite limit itself? Why would the ocean pretend to be a drop? Because to be everything is to be nothing. If you are everywhere, you are nowhere. If you know everything, you have nothing to learn. If you are infinite light, you cannot see yourself, because there is no darkness to provide contrast. So, the universe fractures itself. It shatters the mirror of the one into the billions of the many. It creates the illusion of separation so that it can have a relationship. It forgets who it is so that it can have the thrill of remembering. Every time you fall in love, it is the universe falling in love with itself. Every time you learn a new fact, it is the universe discovering a part of itself it had hidden. Every time you look into another person's eyes and feel a spark of recognition, it is the universe winking at itself from behind the mask. We are playing a cosmic game of hide and seek. The tragedy of the human condition, the loneliness, the fear, the pain is the price we pay for the game. We have to believe the mask is real, or the game doesn't work. We have to believe we are mortal, or the stakes don't matter. We have to believe we are separate, or there is no drama. But deep down, in the quiet moments, in the silence between thoughts, you know the truth. You feel the hum of the machine. And this leads us to the final question, the question that I want you to carry with you into the dark. Sit quietly for a moment, close your eyes, watch the thoughts that drift across the screen of your mind. Watch the images, the voices, the memories. Now ask yourself, where do they come from? Do you manufacture them? Do you sit there and consciously build every sentence before you hear it? Do you construct the image of your mother's face pixel by pixel? No, they just appear. They float up from the darkness like bubbles in a pond. You don't create your thoughts. You receive them. If the brain is an antenna and consciousness is a broadcast, then who is the DJ? Who is talking? Are you the thinker or are you the listener? Is it possible that the voice in your head, the narrator you call I, is not you at all? Is it possible that you are just listening to the universe thinking? Maybe your great ideas, your sudden inspirations, your deepest intuitions are not generated by the neurons in your skull. Maybe they are downloads from the cloud. Maybe they are the whispers of the hive mind passing through your specific frequency. If this is true, then you are never alone. You cannot be alone. The silence is not empty. It is full of signal. When you lay your head down tonight, remember this. You are not a tiny, fragile biological machine fighting for survival on a rock in space. You are the edge of reality. You are the focal point where the past meets the future. You are the breakdown of the wave function. You are the universe, waking up from a long, dark dream, rubbing its eyes and realizing that it is alive. The separation is an illusion. The fear is a biological trick. The death you fear is just the water returning to the ocean. We are the observers. We are the witnesses. And as long as we keep looking, the universe will keep existing. The light stays on as long as our eyes are open. So do not be afraid of the vastness. The vastness is you. Do not be afraid of the mystery. You are the mystery. We have reached the end of our transmission. The signal is fading, but the connection remains. The antenna is always on. Good night, and I will see you in the next video.